to just ground us today as we come together and get started. And then I'm going to hand this over to our consulting team who's helping us with this project. And one of the first things I want to do is share the university's land acknowledgement, which says, "We acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities." So I read the land acknowledgement from the university as it's written, out of respect for the wonderful people at our institution who know a lot more about this than I do, who worked to prepare this statement. I also acknowledge that land acknowledgements are just one step and can be performative at times. And so I think as you're going to hear today, we are really trying to plan our response to climate change with equity at the center. And that means beginning to acknowledge and acknowledging, not beginning to acknowledge, acknowledging the links between colonialism and climate change, and thinking about all of the systems that bring us to where we are when we're addressing climate change. And so we're deeply committed to this statement not being just a statement, but being a reminder and grounding and a starting point in this work that we're going to do. I also want to acknowledge, as we come off a week where we had 107-degree temperature for the first time, for the 5th time ever in recorded history in Salt Lake, hottest summer, as we all enjoy the wildfire smoke that's in our valley right now, I want to acknowledge the impacts, the effects of climate change that we're experiencing right now, and the grief that can come along with that, and that not everyone experiences those impacts equally. And I want to thank you all for being here, because what we are asking you to do is lend your voice and be a resource in our response to address climate change. But I want to encourage you to feel empowered by participating in this, because it can be really depressing. And so just taking action today, I hope will lift you up a little bit. The university is working to do something in response to climate change, and you all are part of that. So thanks for being with us. I want to turn time over now. I think Susanna, you first, or Janica first, to Susanna Haas-Lyons to take us from here.
Thanks so much for getting us started and for your words to center us in the importance of this work and where we are today. So I want to give us a sense of what we're hoping to do today in this session, and thank you all for joining us. This is a really important opportunity to create a climate change action plan that is responsive to the needs and hopes of the full ecosystem of this community here on campus. And so how we'll be spending our time together, Carrie just got us started. We'll look a little bit at the climate change action plan, what it is and what it's building on. And we want to introduce to you the opportunities for the campus community to be engaged, and opportunities for you to support that, and then a chance to ask some questions. We want to note that for those that would appreciate having the ability to have closed captioning, you can access the closed captioning in the bottom right if you click on the live transcript piece. So when we're talking about what we're hoping to do here today, it's really about introducing the plan so that we can support you. We know that all of you are connectors and information providers and leaders on campus in a wide variety of ways, and we'll actually in a minute see who's here. We want to be able to encourage the folks that you interact with to have their voice, to learn about why and how it's so important to center equity in this work, and to be able to encourage people to have their voices heard, to support and amplify that. Today, you're going to hear from, you heard from Carrie, you'll hear from Janica McFeely, who's the principal in the project and with an organization called Integral Group that has a lot of experience working with university campuses and creating climate action plans. You'll hear from Shalini Sinha, who is an equity consultant and doing some incredible systems change work in a variety of contexts. And then myself, who I'm leading the engagement work, and it's my privilege to do that. But before we jump in, I want to give us all an opportunity to introduce ourselves. And so if you would be so kind, I'll put into the chat a request for you to please respond in chat yourself. You could include your name, your role, and your affiliation at the U or your department. And we're also curious just to take a second and think about what impact do you hope the U's climate change action plan will have on yourself, on your role in the university, on the community, or even larger. Thank you for taking the time to respond and think about what it means to you around this action plan and what impact it could have. We appreciate that. Yeah, just type it into chat and press enter whenever you've got something you feel like you're ready to share. Yeah. Yeah. So if you put yours in already, please take a peek at what others have contributed. Yeah, this is great. Such interesting, different perspectives here. You know, some of us are interested in changing our work at the university and making it more sustainable and connected. Some of us are thinking about our place in the Valley and our ability to be able to support the region and the people in the region to be healthy. For others, it's really about a sense of hope and change, knowing that we can do something even though it's hard. Working together is something that comes out in a number of our approaches, and thinking about how we can support each of us to feel hope and take action, be inspired to take action. This is amazing. And, you know, and also recognizing, you know, Joanne and someone else who just put in, talked about the importance of that this is an anchor institution, that it has an opportunity to really support positive influence on so many pieces because of the interconnectedness of this university within the region. And so there's a real chance for this. So thank you for taking that. If you haven't had a chance to put yours in, please do feel free to do so. And so we're all had a chance to think a little bit about what the impact could be of this plan. We're also curious about the university has done a lot already over the last while to take action on climate change. Which of the U climate change actions are you aware of? And you can select all that apply. Are you aware of the President's Climate Leadership Commitment, which recently was renewed? Are you aware of some of the advances in sustainability curriculum and research? Some of the reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, 31%. 50% of electricity is coming from renewable sources, that there's a new 2040 target date for net zero emissions. And so you can click on the ones that you are aware of and then scroll down to the bottom to press submit. And we will talk a little bit more about some of the things the university's done. So if you're not already aware of those, we'll give you a little bit of intel about it.
Susanna, I saw it pop up for a minute, but then it went away. Did anyone else have that?
Thank you so much for naming that. Okay, there we go. I was like, wondering why we hadn't seen any submissions. And now I know. Great. Great. So 3/4 of us have submitted. I'll leave it open for another 10 seconds or so, and then I'll show you what we're aware of. This is a group that's pretty informed, not surprisingly, but really nice to see. So I'll leave it open for 5 more seconds. You'll have to scroll down to the bottom to press submit if you did want to add yours. All right. I'm going to end the poll and share the results with you. So you can see that almost all of us are aware of the new 2040 target date, the one at the bottom, followed by advances in sustainability curriculum and research. Those ones are both over 75%. At about 2/3, that people are aware of the president leadership commitment and the fact that our electricity is coming from renewable sources. And then just over half of us are aware of the 31% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So that's great. So thank you all for taking the time. Well, we do want to share with you a little bit more about what the university has been doing and a little bit about the Climate Change Action Plan itself. And at this time, I'd like to invite Janica McFeely to come and give us a bit of context.
Great. Thank you, Susanna. Would you mind sharing slide? Oh, great. So the University of Utah has already done a lot to advance climate change and resilience actions. You go to the next slide, Susanna. And we know that climate change is here. It's visible with all the things that Carrie shared in her opening comments. And the University of Utah has recognized that in looking at climate change action plan update at this time, 10 years later, 12 years later, that it's important to factor in both mitigation and adaptation and resilience. So we're looking at both mitigation and adaptation resilience within this update and through the engagement opportunities that we'll be having this fall. We also recognize that there are community members who face multiple barriers and will experience the consequences of climate change much more intensely than others. So that's the real focus and at the heart of the engagement process that we're developing to help inform the plan. Next slide, Susanna. So the university has already, as you all know, taken action to reduce emissions and expanded the way that sustainability and climate change are represented in academics and research. Also taken action to reduce water use, which is very much connected to climate change, obviously, especially with the Great Salt Lake that you're all around. And also work to improve energy efficiency. So a lot of the sort of practices of mitigation and also expanding knowledge have been started by the university. And so we're looking to build on those actions and also determine what needs to be the next step priorities at this phase. Next slide. So with that 31% in emissions, that came primarily through changes to electricity procurement, so moving towards more renewable energy, as well as energy efficiency measures on campus. And there's lots of work that has been done to evaluate options to reduce emissions from fossil fuels on campus, and still much more work to happen in order to figure out the pathway to 2040 to operationalize meaningful emissions reductions on campus itself. Next slide. So more to do. You go to the next one, Susanna. What we're looking to do now is to ask for the community support to identify what are the strategies that we need to go above and beyond those measures that have already been started. Are you able to go to the next slide, Susanna?
I am actually. The next slide is actually Shalini.
Oh, great. Thank you. So I'll just finish up to say that in terms of what we're looking for with the new climate action plan, we're also looking to articulate the story of why it's important for the University of Utah to do this update at this time, and what the priorities are beyond just the technical strategies that the university has already embarked on. So looking especially to broaden how climate change action looks like in the academic and research mission, as well as in the health system. And again, folding in that adaptation and resilience component into the plan. So I'll pass it over to Shalini to talk about our engagement activities.
Great, thank you, Janica. So Janica was talking about some of the things that the U is already doing and ways that the U is already looking to respond to and change around climate action. So one of the things that the U is already doing is centering equity as we're thinking about this process. Now, just in case you're not thinking about this so much or haven't had a chance to think about this deeply, let's think a little bit about why it's important to center equity into a climate action plan. And it's because people who experience structural inequity in society tend to also experience greater impacts from climate action. Those who experience more in society tend to also participate in actions that may be contributing more to climate action. Sustainability has equity at its center if we need to go forward. And so the University of Utah has made a strong commitment to making sure that issues of equity and impacts on equity are centered throughout this climate action plan. And that means making sure the voices of people who are historically marginalized are central in this process. As we go through, I'm going to show you a bit about how we've been thinking about that and what you can see that we're doing, so that when you're communicating this to others, I want to make sure that this is clear in your mind, how we're doing this a little differently. If you can show us the next slide. So a couple of reasons why we would center equity. Several of these are already going to realize or know. This is, of course, a core value of the U. It is also one of the 3 pillars of sustainability. And more importantly, something that has driven this clearly is that this is something that the campus community has expressed and asked for, and the university is responding to. So as we go forward and I show you some of the engagement pieces, we're going to show you how we're thinking about this and how to respond. Some higher level things to think about are, as I mentioned, that a resilient future is not actually possible if we don't address issues of equity. How people can participate in this, how it's being impacted on people varies quite differently. And if we don't hold this in our minds as we're going through, we're not going to create an appropriate and effective action plan. And so we have it strongly centered here. And the last one is for you to be able to go away and realize that the role you're playing when you participate as a leader and communicator in a plan that is centering equity, you get to be a strong leader in climate action. And we do appreciate the work that you do in your work. And so we'll be doing as part of this project to help people know about it and to further this. Can we see the next slide? Let us take you through what we're going to include in this plan. So this plan is going to be looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's going to be looking at preparing for climate change impacts. It will be looking at educating sustainability leaders and supporting climate research. All of this will be anchored with principles of equity at the center of it. So as we go through, how do we hear those voices that can contribute to these areas? What conditions do we create so that those voices can flow? What do we do with what those voices say? And how do we stay in relationship with those voices as we're going through? If we can see the next slide. So this is the exciting part. There's a number of engagement opportunities that we've been planning and thinking about as we go forward. We have some equity listening sessions coming forward. We have a survey that is going to be launched very soon. We have pop-ups that will be in places that will allow people to have some very quick, as I'm walking by, responses and inputs. We will have in-person roundtable discussions on campus, and we'll have some online roundtable discussions. I'm going to take you through the equity listening sessions a bit more, and then Susanna is going to take us through the rest. So holding out some of the principles that I was sharing with you before, we want to think about how do we include voices and how do we create an environment so that those voices can really tell us what they experience, what they feel, what they think, and input into the action plan. And the way that we have decided to do this is to have specific equity listening sessions. So specific listening sessions that are centered around places where community exists amongst people in the university community who have been historically marginalized. We're working through relationships that already exist in places where community has already been formed. So some of those examples are through our student center. We have our Black Students Cultural Center. We have the American Indian Resource Center. a number of centers there that we're looking to work through. We're looking to work through our university neighborhood partnerships, who's been doing a lot of that relationship building and thinking work in our communities. We've been identifying different faculty members who think about this area and are connected to this area by identity or by the area that they do research in. And we've been thinking about U Health and how that community forms into this. I will be looking at, through those existing relationships, making some specific events where not only will we create a culture that supports these voices and makes it easier to participate, but we'll be taking the information that we're hearing from there and allowing that to feed back into other engagement activities that we're having. So in that way, those experiences, those voices, those ideas will become more central in the entire process. And I feel like there's one more key thing that I want to share with you. Many of our other engagement activities are kind of more open. We're going to be doing a lot of communications and getting people to participate on a broad, bigger scale. However, in order to make sure that equity comes through and those voices come through, we've been more thoughtful and intentional and strategic about how we create and where we create these spaces. So these equity listening sessions are going to happen through parts of the university where these communities have already been built. Like I mentioned, the student centers, the university neighborhood partnerships, through identifying those faculty. And you can make people aware of all the activities and encourage people to participate. These ones in particular, they will participate through the ways that they form community in those specific groups that are historically marginalized. So I'm making a slight distinction there on how people will connect and get involved here. But just wanted you to know that. So with that, I'm going to let Susanna take you through the rest of the engagement activities.
Thank you, Shalini. And we early on spent some time talking to people about what should engagement through this climate change action plan look like. And one of the things we heard was work with existing relationships. And so that very much informs how we're approaching the equity listening sessions, but also why we're opening up this session to invite you in. So something that's going to be available to anyone, both on campus and off campus, is this online survey that will be launched very soon, as Shalini mentioned. And actually, you can look for it in the At the U newsletter that's going to come out next week. And so it's a fairly simple survey. There's one thing I'll want to point out here is that we are encouraging people partly to participate for a chance to win a $100 gift card. And so if there are folks who may be nudged by that, please let them know. And we're going to ask questions like, the U is already taking action that in things that we've talked about today, which ones might be most important to you? All right, I mentioned that gift card. And so there's about 4 questions about tell us what's important to you, what kind of co-benefits or additional benefits you'd like to see in the action plan. And then there's a chance for, depending on how you are involved with the university, a question or 2 to ask about your role particularly. So there's a question just for students or just for faculty or staff, or we have a U of Health patient survey. So there's a piece about your role in the university and what kind of action would you like to see happen. So that survey is going to be open for about 3 or 4 weeks until mid-October. We're going to follow up today with a bunch of resources, which will include the exact timeline on the survey. But this is probably the simplest, less than 10 minutes way for anyone to get involved. We are also going to do pop-ups. The amazing sustainability office team is going to be out in the campus community with information tables and boards to give people some sense of what's happening and also to drive them to participate in the survey. So for this and other information about when these things are happening, our sustainability office climate commitment webpage, and we'll put the link in as we go, can give you information about what's happening and when, but you can keep an eye out for these things. Then for those who are excited about this work and really have something that they want to share, there are open roundtables for people to participate. And really the purpose of these workshop roundtables pieces are to collaboratively develop climate actions, refine them, and prioritize them. And there'll be 3 audiences for the work roundtables: general, anyone, one's focused on education and research, and some focused on healthcare. We'll be having online only or in-person only workshops or roundtables. So for those that are just, they're not in specifically around curriculum or research or around healthcare, these open ones are a good fit. And this will be 2 in-person ones on the same day, so midday and end of day, around thinking around what are the actions and what are the principles or values that should guide this work. So here we're looking to articulate what's really important to us as we create this plan, and what are the ideas for action we'd like to see. Then later, a few weeks later, there's going to be a workshop for people who want to help draft a decision-making framework. So, how do we balance the various pieces that we know are going to be important? And then we'll test that framework through a variety of other online workshops, including this one at the end of November, where we'll be able to prioritize, all the actions we've been hearing about. So this is a brainstorming and values. This is a decision-making framework. How do we evaluate our possible actions? And here's actually an evaluation of the ones that we're most excited about. For those that are interested in the role of education and research to advance our response to climate action, this will be a chance in person on Wednesday the 26th to talk about those opportunities and principles and values, and then also the prioritization workshop on mid-November. And for those that are focused on healthcare, there's again a chance to brainstorm ideas in person, and then a prioritization one where we'll be applying that decision-making framework piece. So we will send you all those dates. And how this all fits in, we've been talking about the fall engagement. So this equity listening sessions, the pop-ups, the survey, these are brainstorming our ideas. Then those roundtables will be refining those ideas, reviewing them, expanding, and then prioritizing them. All of this will feed into the development of a draft plan, which will then bring back to key audiences, particularly those most impacted by climate change because of their identities, and getting feedback. Does this reflect what you told us? Does this reflect your priorities? And what could we do to make sure that this has an impact we all want it to have? And then we'll finalize it in the spring. So that's what you can expect from this piece. And then I just have a couple more slides, and then we'll open for questions and comments. So we hope that you will support us to bring voices on campus into shaping the plan. And so there are things like encouraging people to fill out the survey, encouraging people to sign up for the roundtables. We'll have an Eventbrite page where people can sign up for one or a number as they are interested. We hope that if you have connections with students that are part of some of the campus groups that Shalini was talking about, that you'll encourage them to ask about these equity listening sessions and get involved. You are welcome to answer questions that you feel equipped to, and you can also direct people to the Sustainability Office webpage or the pop-up events as you see them. We'll have some posters and social media and email and newsletters that we hope that you will pass on to others. And of course, we hope that you too will participate. You are all an important part of the different parts of this campus, and we would love to hear your ideas and priorities. And following this orientation, we'll provide you some information to help you involve others and get involved yourself. So we'll provide some of those materials I talked about. We'll provide a recording and slide deck that we're presenting right now, and a link to the survey and a link to register to the roundtables. So that's what you can expect. And I'd like to pause now and see if you have any questions or suggestions for us as we think about going forward with this work. And feel free to either unmute or a small group, raise your hand, or put it into chat. And if you're curious about how to raise hand, it is, let's see if it's in the reactions. Yeah, so the little smiley face with the plus along the bottom bar, if you click on that, raised hand is one of those options. So given what you've seen, what do you think? What advice do you have for us? What questions might you have? Okay, Lori, thank you. So thinking about folks in the disability community. So this is great. And Shalini, I'll just start with you. Have you started conversations with the disability community on campus or in the community at large?
No, I haven't. We've started with one-to-one conversations with key equity leaders and connectors on campus and have been generating from that directions and relationships on where to go through. So we know that there's the student support services for students accessing accommodations and who have disabilities. And if you have other ideas on places for me to connect in so that we could look at a listening session, I'd love to hear that.
And just in case folks are listening and not looking at the screen, I'll just read the question, which was, what engagement is happening with the disability community? For example, community members with disabilities at the U and in Salt Lake Valley, U Disability Studies and community organizations. And I want to add on to Shalini's invitation to help provide some suggestions. We know that people with disabilities can be disproportionately impacted by climate change. And so in the survey, there are some demographic questions. And one of those is to ask people to self-identify as someone with a disability. I can't remember exact question wording, because we want to make sure we're hearing from those voices. So thanks for that. Other suggestions or questions or encouragements like this one? While you're thinking, I'm going to put a question into the chat for you. Thanks, Carrie, for responding. So Carrie mentioned that we are working with the Dean of Transform to connect with disability studies. So a question for you. What advice do you have for us about the climate change action plans engagement efforts this fall? You've seen what we're planning. What advice do you have? You know, one thing I think we didn't include in our overview is that we are working with U Health to engage some community members in the West Valley to give them a chance to provide some guidance and advice about the actions that this climate change action plan can reflect. Thanks very much for your comment, Allison. And yeah, and one of the comments that just came in is the importance of having many voices represented at the table when discussing solutions. And we really agree with that. It's we know that people's lived experience is the best way to understand the degree to which this will meet their needs and concerns and leverage the potential that they see. So thanks for that. Well, I'm hoping that this has been informative for the plans that we have to involve the broader community. I did mention that you can look for at the U on September 19th. There will be a message coming out. And thank you very much for registering for this workshop. We will use the list to send out the resources we have. And if you are noticing things as you're going out there and sharing information with the community, we are very much open to your feedback and suggestions. And we really appreciate your time and interest. Yeah, and of course, yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to digest what you've heard and seen, and that's totally fine. We are open. Actually, Julie or Carrie, would one of you mind just putting, or I think some of the other staff is in here too. Thank you. Exactly what I was hoping for, the link to the Climate Commitment website, and then also an email address as well, if anybody wants to follow up. That would be wonderful. So at this point, I'm going to pause. Shalini, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a point looking at some of the points that have been made in the chat. And one point was talking about, you know, looking to have as many diverse voices as possible represented at the roundtables. It gives me a chance to actually share another piece of the equity thinking that, you know, didn't come out in the first part of my presentation, because I was focused a little bit on the engagement opportunities that are coming up. But one more layer in which we're making sure that equity continues to be centered through this plan. Well, I suppose 2 layers. We're really not going to leave it to, hoping or trying to make sure that all that diversity comes out at those roundtables. One of the functions of the equity listening sessions is to be more intentional and strategic, but also to create spaces where we can kind of create a different culture that's more appropriate and more comfortable for folks from different marginalized groups to share and to share their voices. What comes out of those equity listening sessions will inform not only the other engagement plans, but what we're thinking about in the report, kind of in a different way. So I want to assure all of you that we're not really going to rely on whether or not we get a majority of diverse voices out for those voices to be heard. What we're going to rely on is our intention that when we hear those voices, we're going to pay attention to them and carry what they're saying through, as we're seeing how that interacts with what everyone else is saying. So I hope that's clear in terms of just that extra layer of how we're thinking about equity when we go to build the actual plan.
Thanks so much, Shalini. Carrie, can I pass it over to you to close us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to our consulting team for sharing all this great information. Thanks to all of you for being here and taking time today. I'm going to try and give you a few minutes back in your schedule. And I think I would just add one more request, and that's just to talk about this. We are back in a space where we are getting information by talking to other people on campus. And so if you are in campus on person, or if you're in Zoom meetings, I think some of this is just spreading the word. So we've talked a lot about the formal channels, but I'd also invite you to just try and get the word out by chatting with people that this is going on. We're a big, complex organization. So I think that will help a lot. And just want to say thank you. I hope you will all not only let people know what's going on, but please participate. I know many of you, and there are really important voices with a lot of wisdom to share on this topic here. And so thanks for being here today. And we look forward to having you as part of this process over the coming months.